If you had told me a year ago that a series of impulsive choices would lead to the unraveling of my marriage, I would have laughed in disbelief. My name is Jessica, and for the longest time, I thought I had everything: a stable marriage, 2 wonderful kids, and a life that, while not perfect, felt steady. But something was missing. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Maybe it was the routine, the predictability of it all. My husband, Tom, was a good man. He worked hard, loved our family, and was the kind of person everyone admired. Yet, somewhere along the way, I started to feel invisible, as if I had become just another part of the background in his life. That's when I met Ryan. He wasn't part of my world. He was younger, vibrant, and completely different from anyone I had ever been drawn to before. We met at the gym, where his charm and easy confidence immediately caught my attention. At first, our conversations were innocent, quick hellos, casual chats about workout routines. But as weeks turned into months, those fleeting moments began to feel like the highlight of my day. Ryan was bold in a way that Tom wasn't. He noticed the little things: a new haircut, a different pair of sneakers, and his compliments, though seemingly harmless, lit a spark in me that I hadn't felt in years. I told myself it was harmless. It was just attention, after all, something I craved but hadn't realized I was missing. But harmless turned into something more the day Ryan invited me for coffee. "It's just coffee," I told myself as I agreed. No harm in that. Sitting across from him in a cozy cafe, I felt like a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. I told myself that was all it would be: one coffee, one conversation. But one turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, we were texting late into the night, sharing parts of ourselves that had nothing to do with workouts or casual banter. The day it turned physical was both thrilling and devastating. I told myself it was a mistake, that it would never happen again. But the pull of Ryan was too strong, and the more time I spent with him, the more distant Tom and I became. Tom noticed the changes, of course. He wasn't oblivious. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night as we lay in bed, the space between us feeling like a chasm. "Just stressed," I lied, turning away from him. I hated myself for the deception, for the way I had started to compartmentalize my life into 2 separate worlds. In one, I was the devoted wife and mother, going through the motions of a marriage that felt increasingly hollow. In the other, I was someone else entirely, free, reckless, and consumed by the thrill of something forbidden. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and mine was no exception. One evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen after dinner, Tom walked in holding my phone. His expression was one I had never seen before, a mix of confusion, hurt, and anger. "Who's Ryan?" he asked, his voice trembling. My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice too defensive, too quick. "I saw the messages, Jessica," he said, his voice breaking. I saw everything. There was no denying it, no way to spin the truth. The look on his face told me he had seen enough to know exactly what had been happening. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tom, How long?" he repeated, louder this time. I couldn't lie anymore. "A few months," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. The silence that followed was unbearable. Tom stared at me as if I were a stranger, someone he no longer recognized. "I need you to leave," he said finally, his voice cold and distant. "Tom, please," I begged. "Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, walking away. That night, I packed a bag and left the house I had called home for over a decade. As I drove to a friend's place, the weight of what I had done hit me like a tidal wave. I had betrayed the man who had loved me unconditionally, the father of my children, for a fleeting connection that had felt like a lifeline in the moment but now seemed like a chain pulling me under. The morning after I left, reality came crashing down on me like a cold wave. I woke up on the couch at my friend Claire's house, surrounded by an unfamiliar quiet. My phone buzzed incessantly on the coffee table, texts and missed calls, some from Tom, others from friends and family who had clearly heard bits and pieces of what had happened. Claire, always the pragmatic one, handed me a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "So," she said, her tone measured but firm, "are you ready to talk about it?" I sighed, staring into the steaming mug. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with the truth," she said simply. "What happened, Jess?" I told her everything, the growing distance between Tom and me, the allure of Ryan, and the choices that had led me here. Claire listened without interrupting, her expression a mixture of disappointment and empathy. "You made a mess of things," she said when I finished, her voice gentle but honest. "But you already know that. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I didn't have an answer. All I could think about was the look on Tom's face when he confronted me, the pain in his eyes that I knew I had caused. The next few days were a blur of emotions, guilt, shame, and a deep sense of loss. Tom and I exchanged a few brief texts, mostly about the kids and logistics. He made it clear that he wasn't ready to talk about anything else. I spent hours replaying our marriage in my mind, searching for the moment when things had started to fall apart. Had it been gradual, a series of small cracks that we had ignored until they became a chasm? Or had it been something sudden, a shift I hadn't noticed until it was too late? One evening, as I sat on Claire's porch, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "How are you holding up?" I stared at the message, a surge of anger and frustration bubbling inside me. Ryan had been a catalyst for everything that had happened, but blaming him felt like a cop-out. The truth was, I had made my own choices. I didn't respond. Instead, I started drafting a letter to Tom. My therapist, whom I had started seeing in the wake of everything, had suggested it as a way to organize my thoughts and take responsibility for my actions. "Tom, I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, and I won't blame you if you can't. But I need you to know how sorry I am, for the lies, for the betrayal, for all the pain I've caused. None of this was your fault. You were a wonderful husband and father, and I took that for granted. I lost sight of what really mattered, and I made choices that I will regret for the rest of my life. I hope that one day, you'll be able to see that my mistakes don't define the love I still have for you and our family. But for now, I'll respect your space and your boundaries. You deserve that much, at least." I folded the letter and left it in his mailbox, unsure if he would even read it. The next day, he called. "I got your letter," he said, his tone unreadable. "And?" I asked hesitantly. There was a long pause before he said, "I don't know what to do with it. With any of this." "I understand," I said softly. "I just needed you to know how sorry I am." "I do," he said, his voice quieter now. "But sorry doesn't fix this, Jessica. It doesn't change what happened." "I know," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. For the kids, maybe," he said. "But for us? I don't know if that's possible." His words were like a knife to my heart, but I couldn't blame him. I had shattered the foundation of our marriage, and rebuilding it felt like an impossible task. In the weeks that followed, we focused on co-parenting. Tom was civil but distant, our interactions limited to what was necessary for the kids. I threw myself into therapy, determined to understand not just what had happened, but why. "Affairs don't happen in a vacuum," my therapist said during one session. "They're usually a symptom of deeper issues, both within the relationship and within yourself." She was right. I had spent so much time focusing on what I felt was missing in my marriage that I hadn't stopped to consider how I could address those needs in a healthy way. One evening, as I was picking up the kids from Tom's house, he surprised me by asking if I wanted to stay for dinner. "It's nothing fancy," he said, shrugging. "Just spaghetti." I hesitated, unsure if this was a step forward or just an act of kindness for the kids. But I agreed, and for the first time in weeks, we sat down as a family. The meal was simple, the conversation light. But as I watched Tom laugh with the kids, I felt a pang of longing for the life we had once shared. When the kids went to bed, Tom and I sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. "I don't know if we'll ever get back to where we were," he said finally. "But I think we owe it to the kids to try." His words were cautious, tentative, but they filled me with a glimmer of hope. "I'd like that," I said, my voice trembling. "Whatever it takes." Rebuilding trust is like trying to balance on a tightrope. It requires patience, focus, and the willingness to take things one small step at a time. After that unexpected dinner at Tom's house, we fell into a tentative rhythm. Our conversations were civil but cautious, mostly revolving around the kids or the logistics of their schedules. It was clear that Tom was still guarded, and rightfully so. The pain of my betrayal lingered in the spaces between us, even in the moments when we tried to act normal for the sake of the children. One evening, after dropping the kids off at his place, Tom asked if I could stay to discuss something. I hesitated, unsure of what was coming, but nodded. We sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I've been thinking about therapy," he said, his voice measured. "Not just for you, but for us. I don't know if it will help, but I think we need to try, for the kids, if nothing else." I blinked, caught off guard by his words. "I think that's a good idea," I said softly. "I'm not saying this means I forgive you," he added quickly. "I don't know if I ever can. But I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to be good parents, even if we can't fix us." The word stung, but I understood where he was coming from. I had no right to expect his forgiveness, let alone a path back to the marriage we had once shared. We started therapy the following week. Sitting across from Tom in the therapist's office, I felt exposed, vulnerable, and deeply ashamed. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Harper, began by setting the ground rules. "This is a space for honesty," she said. "It's not about assigning blame, it's about understanding and moving forward, whatever that might look like for you both." Tom went first, his words raw but measured. "I feel like I don't know who she is anymore," he admitted. "I thought we had a solid marriage, and then I found out she'd been lying to me for months. It's like everything we built was a lie." His words cut deep, but I forced myself to listen without interrupting. When it was my turn, I struggled to find the right words. "I know I hurt you," I said finally, my voice trembling. "And I wish I could take it back, but I can't. All I can do is take responsibility for what I did and try to understand why I let it happen." Dr. Harper nodded, her expression encouraging. "That's a good start, Jessica. Understanding the why is an important part of healing, for both of you." In the weeks that followed, we continued therapy, gradually peeling back the layers of our fractured relationship. Tom admitted that he had felt distant from me long before the affair, though he hadn't realized it at the time. "I thought we were just busy," he said during one session. "With work, with the kids. I didn't think it was anything more than that." I felt invisible, I admitted. Like I was just going through the motions, and no one noticed. Ryan wasn't about love or even real connection, it was about feeling seen. Tom's jaw tightened at the mention of Ryan, but he didn't interrupt. As difficult as those conversations were, they opened the door to something we hadn't had in years, honest communication. We started talking more outside of therapy, sharing our fears, frustrations, and hopes for the future. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Tom and I sat on the porch with cups of tea. The air was cool, and the stars above seemed brighter than usual. "I've been thinking about what forgiveness really means," he said, breaking the silence. I looked at him, unsure of where he was going. "What do you mean?" "I think it's less about forgetting what happened and more about choosing to move forward despite it," he said. "I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm trying." His words filled me with a cautious hope. "That's all I can ask for," I said softly. The kids, blissfully unaware of the complexities unfolding between us, seemed happier with both parents involved. We started doing more as a family, movie nights, trips to the park, and even a weekend outing to the zoo. During one of those outings, as we watched the kids feed the giraffes, Tom turned to me and said, "It's nice doing this together." "It is," I agreed, my heart aching with a mix of longing and gratitude. But as much progress as we were making, there were still setbacks. There were moments when Tom's anger resurfaced, when he couldn't hide the hurt in his eyes. And there were moments when I doubted whether we could ever truly move past what had happened. Through it all, we kept showing up, for each other, for the kids, and for ourselves. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. The weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of our lives began to feel less jagged, less fraught with tension. Tom and I had settled into a fragile but functional partnership. Therapy became a lifeline, a place where we could air our grievances and tackle the complicated emotions that lingered between us. Dr. Harper often reminded us that rebuilding trust wasn't about erasing the past but about creating a new foundation. "Trust is earned in small moments," she said during one session. "It's about consistency, honesty, and the willingness to confront discomfort." Those words stayed with me, and I tried to embody them every day. I made a conscious effort to be open with Tom, even about the little things. I told him when I was running late, when I felt overwhelmed, when I wasn't sure what to say. It felt vulnerable, exposing myself in ways I hadn't before, but I knew it was necessary. Tom, too, began to soften. He started asking about my day again, engaging in conversations that felt less obligatory and more genuine. There were still moments of distance, times when his guard went up, but those moments became less frequent as time went on. One evening, as we sat at the dining table after dinner, Tom surprised me by asking, "Do you ever regret it?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Every day." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Why did you do it, then?" I took a deep breath, trying to articulate feelings that still felt tangled. I think I was looking for something I didn't know how to ask for. Attention, maybe. Validation. I felt like I was disappearing into the routines of our life, and I didn't know how to tell you that. Tom's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "It wasn't about Ryan," I continued. "Not really. It was about me and my own insecurities. And I hate that I hurt you because of them." His shoulders sagged slightly, and he ran a hand through his hair. I wish you'd come to me instead." "I wish I had, too," I said softly. That conversation, as painful as it was, marked a turning point. For the first time, it felt like we were truly confronting the cracks in our relationship rather than tiptoeing around them. We started spending more time together, not just for the kids, but for ourselves. We went on walks, cooked meals side by side, and even started watching a show together after the kids went to bed. It felt tentative, like rediscovering each other after years of drifting apart. One weekend, Tom suggested we take the kids on a short road trip to the beach. The idea of being in close quarters for an extended period made me nervous, but I agreed. The trip turned out to be exactly what we needed. The kids were thrilled, their laughter filling the car as we played road trip games and sang along to the radio. At the beach, we built sandcastles, chased waves, and shared ice cream cones under the warm sun. One evening, as the kids played nearby, Tom and I sat on a blanket, watching the sunset. "This feels nice," he said, his tone hesitant but sincere. "It does," I agreed, glancing at him. "Thank you for suggesting it." He turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "I'm still angry," he admitted. "There are days when I wake up and it all comes rushing back, and I wonder if I'll ever be able to move past it." "I understand," I said, my voice trembling. "And I don't expect you to just forget. I know it's going to take time." Tom nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But there are also moments, like now, when I think maybe we can get through this. That maybe it's worth trying. His words filled me with a cautious hope, a flicker of light in the darkness we'd been navigating. Back home, we continued to build on the progress we'd made. Therapy remained a constant, a space where we could explore the deeper issues in our relationship and within ourselves. Dr. Harper encouraged us to focus on gratitude, to acknowledge the efforts we were both making to repair what had been broken. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, Tom turned to me with a small smile. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "What is it?" I asked, curious. "I want us to go on a date," he said. "Just the two of us. No kids, no distractions. Like we used to." The idea filled me with both excitement and apprehension. "I'd like that," I said, smiling. The date was simple, a quiet dinner at a local restaurant followed by a walk through the park. But it felt significant, a reminder of the connection we had once shared and were slowly rediscovering. As we sat on a park bench, the stars twinkling above us, Tom reached for my hand. "I don't know where this road will take us," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm willing to keep walking it if you are." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "I'm with you," I said softly. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start, a fragile, hopeful step toward a future we were both willing to fight for. The shift in our relationship was subtle at first, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Our date at the park had rekindled something fragile but real, a reminder of the connection we'd once had. It wasn't as though everything had magically resolved overnight, there were still moments of tension, awkwardness, and doubt. But the effort we were both putting in began to create a foundation we could build on. Tom and I started carving out more time for just the two of us. At first, it felt awkward, like trying to fit into clothes that no longer suited us. But as we leaned into the discomfort, something began to shift. We found ourselves laughing at old inside jokes, reminiscing about the early days of our relationship, and sharing pieces of ourselves we hadn't in years. One evening, as we sat on the couch after the kids had gone to bed, Tom turned to me with a serious expression. "Do you remember the first time we met?" I smiled faintly, the memory surfacing like an old photograph. "Of course. You spilled coffee all over yourself trying to open the door for me." He chuckled, a genuine sound that warmed my heart. "I thought I'd ruined my chances right then and there." "I thought it was endearing," I admitted. "It showed me you weren't afraid to laugh at yourself." Tom's expression softened. "I miss that version of us sometimes, the way we used to be." "Me too," I said quietly. "But maybe we can find something even better." The conversation marked a turning point, a shared acknowledgement that while we couldn't go back to who we had been, we could create something new. Our therapy sessions continued to be a crucial part of our journey. Dr. Harper guided us through exercises designed to rebuild trust and improve communication. One week, she asked us to write down 3 things we appreciated about each other and share them during the session. "I appreciate how hard you work for our family," Tom said, his tone earnest. "I appreciate the way you make the kids laugh, and I appreciate that you're willing to do the work to fix this." His words brought tears to my eyes. "I appreciate your patience," I said. "I appreciate how you've stayed committed to the kids, even when things between us were hard. And I appreciate that you're still here, still trying." The exercise, though simple, reminded us of the reasons we had fallen in love in the first place. Our progress wasn't without setbacks. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, when the weight of what had happened felt almost unbearable. But each time, we faced those moments together, leaning on the tools we'd learned in therapy to navigate the pain rather than letting it drive us apart. One weekend, we decided to take the kids camping. It was something we hadn't done before, and the thought of being disconnected from technology and daily distractions felt both daunting and exciting. The trip was filled with its fair share of challenges, mosquito bites, forgotten supplies, and the inevitable sibling squabbles, but it was also filled with moments of joy. We hiked through the woods, roasted marshmallows by the campfire, and stargazed under a clear night sky. One evening, as the kids slept in the tent, Tom and I sat by the fire, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cool night air. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the flickering embers. "All the time," I admitted. "I think about what it would take for us to feel whole again, not just for the kids, but for us." Tom nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think we're getting there. Slowly, but we're getting there." The quiet optimism in his voice gave me hope. Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. We weren't the same couple we had been before the affair, but we were learning to embrace the people we were becoming. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, Tom turned to me with a small smile. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" I asked, curious. "Maybe we should renew our vows," he said. "Not to forget what happened, but to celebrate what we're building now." The idea took me by surprise, but as I looked at him, I knew my answer immediately. "I'd love that," I said, smiling. The ceremony was simple, held in our backyard with just our closest friends and family. As we exchanged vows, I felt a sense of peace and renewal, a promise to move forward with honesty and love. "I promise to choose you every day," Tom said, his voice steady. "To listen, to grow, and to never take what we have for granted again." Tears streamed down my face as I recited my own vows. "I promise to be honest, to communicate, and to cherish the family we've built. I promise to keep fighting for us." The applause that followed was warm and genuine, and as we kissed, I felt a sense of closure and new beginnings all at once. Our life wasn't perfect, it never would be. But it was ours, built on a foundation of resilience, love, and a shared commitment to moving forward. The weeks following our vow renewal were some of the most peaceful we had experienced in years. There was a lightness in our home, a sense of hope that had felt so distant during the darkest days of our relationship. But even as we basked in the progress we had made, we knew the journey was far from over. Tom and I had worked hard to rebuild trust, but trust is not a destination, it's a practice. It's in the small, everyday choices, the way we communicated openly, the effort we put into being present for each other, the patience we exercised when old insecurities surfaced. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Tom turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we're stronger now?" he asked. I considered his question. "I think we're more aware now," I said. "We're not taking each other for granted the way we used to. That has to count for something." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I agree. But sometimes I worry that the past will always be there, lurking in the background." "It probably will," I admitted. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about forgetting, it's about learning to live with it and letting it remind us of what we've overcome." Tom seemed to take comfort in that, and I realized that I did too. Our renewed commitment to each other extended beyond just the two of us. We made a conscious effort to create more memories as a family, to show the kids that love wasn't about perfection but about persistence. One weekend, we planned a surprise picnic in the park. The kids were thrilled, running through the open fields, their laughter echoing through the air. Watching Tom chase them with a playful grin, I felt a swell of gratitude for the life we were rebuilding. Later, as we sat together under a tree, Tom turned to me and said, "I think the kids are happier now." "They are," I agreed. "They can feel the difference." And they could. The tension that had once hung heavy in our home had been replaced by a sense of ease, a quiet understanding that we were all in this together. But even as we moved forward, there were moments when the weight of the past crept back in. One evening, while cleaning out an old drawer, I came across a picture of Ryan and me, a photo I had forgotten existed. My chest tightened as I stared at it, the memory of that time hitting me like a wave. I debated what to do with the photo. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to erase the reminder of my betrayal. But another part of me knew that running from it wouldn't change what had happened. When Tom came home that night, I showed him the photo. "I found this," I said, my voice trembling. I didn't want to hide it from you. He took the photo, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. We don't need that anymore, he said simply. His response was a reminder of how far we had come, not because he had dismissed the hurt, but because he had chosen to focus on the future instead of the past. In therapy, Dr. Harper encouraged us to reflect on what we had learned from our journey. What do you think has changed the most? She asked during one session. I think we've learned how to communicate, Tom said. We're not just talking, we're listening, really listening. I nodded. And I've learned how to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. That's something I didn't do before. Dr. Harper smiled. Those are powerful lessons. And they'll serve you well as you continue to grow together. As we left the session, I felt a sense of pride in the progress we had made. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Tom turned to me with a question that took me by surprise. Do you ever regret staying? The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. No, I said firmly. I regret what I did. I regret the pain I caused. But I don't regret fighting for us. I don't regret choosing to stay. Tom nodded, his expression thoughtful. Neither do I, he said softly. Our life wasn't perfect, it was messy and complicated, filled with challenges we would continue to face. But it was also filled with love, resilience, and a shared determination to keep moving forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, not because everything was resolved, but because we were both committed to the journey. The months following our vow renewal were a testament to how far we had come. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt more natural, less fragile. There were still moments when the past lingered, a shadow that occasionally crossed our path, but those moments became fewer and farther between. Tom and I had grown in ways I never thought possible. We had learned to communicate openly, to confront our fears and insecurities head-on, and to prioritize each other in ways we hadn't before. Our marriage wasn't the same as it had been, it was something new, something stronger. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Tom brought up an idea he'd been considering. I've been thinking about taking a family trip, he said. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Where to? Someplace new, he said. Someplace none of us have been before. I want us to make new memories together, to show the kids what it means to explore and take risks. I smiled, warmed by the thought. That sounds perfect. We spent the next few weeks planning the trip, involving the kids in every decision. They were ecstatic, their excitement infectious. By the time we set off, our car packed to the brim, the anticipation was palpable. The trip was everything we had hoped for and more. We hiked through breathtaking landscapes, tried local foods, and laughed until our sides ached. One evening, as we sat around a campfire under a sky full of stars, Tom turned to me and said, "This feels right." It does, I agreed, squeezing his hand. Back home, the trip became a symbol of our progress, a reminder that we could create new memories, new traditions, and a new chapter for our family. One evening, as we tucked the kids into bed, our oldest turned to us and said, "I like it when we're all happy." His words hit me with a bittersweet ache. So do we, I said, brushing his hair back. After the kids were asleep, Tom and I sat together on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around us. Do you ever think about where we'd be if things had gone differently? Tom asked, his tone contemplative. All the time, I admitted. But I don't think we'd be the people we are now if we hadn't gone through everything. Tom nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I still have moments when it hurts, he said. But I also have moments when I look at you, at the kids, and I feel grateful. Grateful? I asked, surprised. Grateful that we didn't give up, he said. Grateful that we fought for this, even when it felt impossible. Tears welled in my eyes as I reached for his hand. Me too, I said softly. As we sat there, the weight of the past felt lighter than it ever had. We weren't the same people we had been, and our marriage wasn't the same either. But it was ours, imperfect, resilient, and filled with a love that had been tested and proven. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on our journey. It hadn't been easy, it had been messy, painful, and filled with moments of doubt. But it had also been transformative, a reminder of the power of love, forgiveness, and growth. Our story wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a future that honored the lessons we had learned. As I looked at Tom, laughing with the kids over breakfast one morning, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had faced the storm and come out stronger, not because we had forgotten what happened, but because we had chosen to move forward together. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its imperfection, a testament to the strength of resilience and the power of love to heal.